You are listening to the Hiking Radio Network, where we talk the walk with shows by hikers, about hikers, for everybody.
This is the Hammock Hangers Podcast, where we hang out and talk about everything from hammocks and hammock camping to the group hangs from around the country.
Hey, all y'all hammock enthusiasts and chill seekers. Welcome to the Hammock Hangers Podcast, the coziest spot on the pod waves. We are your go-to source for all things hammock related, from laid-back tales to tips and tricks on finding the perfect hang and info from hangs from around the country. So grab yourself a drink, kick back into your favorite hammock, and swing into some awesome conversations. This is where relaxation meets conversation, and it's going to be a one comfy ride. So let's get into it. Hello, everyone, and as you can tell, I'm still not Paul. Paul is still out and about gallivanting with his work life and is not able to make this week's episode again, but hopefully we'll have him back here in the near episodes in the future. We've got a lot of really great content coming up in the next couple of episodes. We'll be heading up to the Fall Sprawl with the Palmetto State Hangers in a couple weeks, and I'm sure we'll have some really great conversations for all of you listeners from that hang, from vendors to hammock campers to just adventurers. So make sure you subscribe and keep up to date with all the great content we've got coming your way. Hopefully you enjoyed last week's episode with Skunkape. It was a really fun conversation that we had with Mark. So make sure if you haven't listened to that one, hop back over and give that one a listen. This week, we've got another really great guest, and I'm really looking forward to learning about her latest adventure. This week, we have YouTube content creator and AT thru-hiker class of 2023, Appalachian Adventurista, or as her family calls her, TC. We have Aly Pagano, who has just finished her AT thru-hike using a hammock as a shelter choice. And so, sit back and enjoy hearing about her swinging through the trail. Welcome to the podcast, Aly.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, we really excited about hearing about your trip. I think I found you on Instagram early in the summer. I think you were only a couple weeks into your hike and said, hey, I really like the stuff that you got coming out, and you're doing the thing in a hammock, and I really want to have you on to kind of speak to kind of that experience. So I'm really glad that we were able to make this happen.
Yeah, thanks so much. I'm excited too. I've been listening to y'all's podcast on my whole AT trip, so this is kind of a full
awesome
experience for me.
Well, awesome, good deal. Well, I appreciate you being one of the 15, 16 people that listen to it on a weekly basis. Well, hopefully it was some good information for you. And we appreciate the shout out. So let's talk about your kind of introductions for you. What type of camping experience had you had before your AT thru-hike?
Yeah, so kind of all kinds. I grew up in Western North Carolina in the mountains doing all of the outdoor stuff. My dad was a park ranger, and my mom really valued that outdoor time for my sister and I growing up. So we grew up doing all the outdoor things, all the hiking and the camping and stuff like that. We had a fifth wheel growing up that we would go camping in. And I think it was sometime in college, I actually got a tent, but it was before that I got my first hammock. So I've been camping and backpacking and hiking. Pretty much for as long as I can remember.
So did the majority of the camping that you had growing up, was it more backpacking or more the camper camping?
Camper camping until sometime in high school. I started maybe middle school, I should say. Actually, I started doing little backpacking trips. Yeah.
Okay. Now, was most of that in Western North Carolina, or did you have some other bigger trips that you would do?
No, that was almost entirely in Western North Carolina. Just given the proximity to some of the other states, we would dip into Tennessee, South Carolina, Georgia, Virginia at times. But yeah, mostly Western North Carolina. That said, with the camper growing up, we would take some longer trips and go up and down the East Coast to New York and back and down to Florida. So yeah, a lot of
Okay.
East Coast, but a lot of, in terms of like backwoods camping, it was mostly Western North Carolina.
Gotcha. So when you decided that you wanted to do your AT through hike, what made you decide to start your YouTube channel?
On a whim, honestly. I was trying to find ways to preserve my hike for myself. And at the same time, I was trying to come up with ways to share my hike with some of my family members who are far away, like in New York, and show them kind of what I was going through beyond just sending pictures every once in a while when I got to town. And so I decided to put together some videos. I had watched adamantly the last like 2 or 3 years of YouTubers who hiked the AT, and I don't know what happened, but I was just sitting on the couch one day watching someone, and I thought to myself, you know what, that actually, I feel like I could do this. It's not, too terribly in depth of video editing that I think is going on. Why don't I give it a try? And so, yeah, it kind of came out of the blue one day. I kind of just off the couch decided to make a YouTube account. And then suddenly I was recording things. This is definitely my passion in life: outdoor hiking, backpacking, all this sort of stuff. And so I found that it was just the easiest thing in the world to record videos about. So yeah, it was kind of just a natural transition. Once I decided to do it, the ball just started rolling downhill, and it has just continued to do so. And I'm glad that I did YouTube, but it has definitely turned into something that I did not expect when I first started.
Hopefully in a good way.
Yes, definitely in a good way. But yeah, very unexpected.
Do you think recording while you were hiking enriched your experience? I can only imagine getting off the trail and having that video record being really great. But do you think that you felt the same way when you were having to lug the extra weight of the camera and things like that on the trail?
Yeah, it feels pretty neutral. In part because I didn't take a very technical setup. I recorded everything with my phone and didn't have any external mics, didn't have any external cameras. I didn't even have a tripod. I used my trekking pole and a hair tie to like stake up my phone.
Very low tech there. Okay,
Yeah.
I'll take that. Yeah.
Yeah, it was very much, I called it hiker trash YouTubing because it was very low energy, or low maintenance, I should say, as a setup. But so yeah, so I didn't have to carry any extra gear, which was nice. And then my style of YouTubing was to do a weekly vlog, and I chose that specifically because I wanted to YouTube, or I wanted to make videos for the reasons that I stated, but also I didn't want it to take away from the actual trail experience itself. And I know most YouTubers are doing daily videos, and I thought that I didn't want to do that, and also that potentially there was a market for some people who are interested in watching the trail, but maybe not quite that in depth of a video. So I went with the weekly videos, and that gave me a lot of space to collect footage and then put it together slowly without feeling too crunched, although I did get a little lazy at times and I got crunched. But yeah, I think having the weekly videos really helped with that.
Gotcha. I can only imagine like the amount of effort and amount of, I don't know, just headache of having like a daily recording on the AT, because I'm sure like some days you're getting at the end and you're just like, the last thing that I want to do is turn on something and talk to anything, I mean, let alone a rock, let alone make a video. Just kind of want to poop out.
Yeah, you'll notice if you watch my videos, I have a lot of really good footage from the first half of the days. And then the second half of every day started to peter off. And especially toward the later half of my hike, there's almost no footage from the evenings at camp, because it was just the last thing, kind of like you're saying, that I was thinking about. And I didn't want to force myself to be thinking about YouTubing instead of whatever else I needed to be taking care of at the time. So, yeah, my vlog is kind of, I guess, unique in that way.
Gotcha. So, what inspired you to take on the AT?
That's a good question. The initial inspiration, I guess I'll call it, goes all the way back to my childhood. So just growing up in Western North Carolina, the Appalachian Trail runs through North Carolina, Tennessee, and Virginia really close to home. And so I ended up touching different parts of the trail growing up, and even into adulthood. I trail run and hike, and I've ended up on the AT several times since then. And so it just being in such close proximity and always having an awareness of what that trail was and where it went, and having an idea of what through hikers were, I probably idolized it a little bit as a kid, but I always had that goal in mind. And then the older I got, I started to realize, okay, I'm graduating from college. I'm headed toward the workforce. What things do I want to do before I get super ingrained into that? And the Appalachian Trail was on the short list. And I think it was late 2020, fall, about this time in 2020, at the start of the pandemic. And I had graduated college and couldn't find work because no businesses were even operating yet. And I pegged 2023 as the year that I was going to go do it. I was like, I just have to pick a year and get ready for it. And so I did. So since 2020, I had been seriously planning, knowing that this was going to be the year.
Okay. So it wasn't kind of a whim that I'm going to do the trail. You had kind of an idea. It sounds like the trail has kind of been calling to you, maybe louder in the last couple of years, but whispers to eventually get into some yells.
Yeah, it was screaming at me for the last probably year and a half. Yeah, that's a good way of putting it.
Gotcha. So what type of preparation did you do to get yourself kind of mentally and physically prepared to take on this 2,000-mile plus hike?
Oh man, so much. Gosh, where do I even begin that one? There was just so much. I mean, so much prep on so many different levels. There's the financial prep, there's the physical prep, where's my stuff going to be while I'm doing this thing? Physical training prep. And then probably the thing that I spent the most time with was the mental prep, because I had heard, left and right and everywhere, that the AT is mostly a mental challenge over anything else. And having completed the trail, I can concur that that's true. And so before the trail, I knew that that was the thing that I wanted to put the most effort into. So that looked like a lot of different things. I did some other long runs and things like that challenged me and put me in situations of kind of physical extremes, so that I could challenge my mental state at those levels and really challenge myself as to what I need when, I reach levels of exhaustion, and when I get to a point where I'm questioning why I still want to be out there. How do I have that conversation in my head of, am I staying on trail? Is this what I want? Do I need to be here? Am I making the right call? All those sort of questions that were going to come up, I knew, at hard times on the AT. I tried to put myself in situations to test those beforehand. And I also did things like writing down I had little phrases ready for myself. I call them mantras, just to pull out at any point in time if I'm really struggling. Things like, one of my favorites was that my success on the Appalachian Trail did not depend on me making it to Katahdin. That's not how I was measuring my success. And so just little things like that I was, for about 3 years, tucking into my back pocket, getting myself ready, trying to prepare the mental state for the AT.
Gotcha. And so when you were looking at this maybe for a lot of people daunting 2,000-mile span, and not wanting to wear yourself out both physically, mentally, maybe spiritually as well. How did you break your hike down into kind of like manageable sections? And looking back, were you able to stick with that?
Yeah, I think I was. It wasn't, breaking up the hike like that wasn't something I planned for ahead of time. It's just something that kind of happened naturally once I started. Because especially when I started in Georgia and I headed northbound toward Katahdin, and especially starting down in Georgia, you almost can't think about Katahdin because it's so unfathomable and so far away. And at least for me, I didn't want to put the pressure on myself of having to make it. That was just a goal I could have, but we would see if I got there. So yeah, I guess it kind of, the trail got broken up into little pieces. Just every week would have little goals. The trail itself got broken up into each resupply. So like 3 to 6 day sections in terms of when I was going to get to town next, or at least get a box to resupply my food. And so at least once a week, the trail was getting broken up into like a little mini goal. And then there were kind of more substantial goals that would come along the way, of like a really exciting mile marker or a really cool feature on the trail like McAfee Knob or something like that that's coming up that I, thought about for a long time and I knew it was coming. So there was little goals and then medium goals, and then there was this like pie in the sky, maybe we'll get to Maine, maybe we'll get to Katahdin, that was kind of always in the background. But I tried really hard to not just think about being out there for the end. So it was all the little things in the middle for me.
Gotcha. So when you did have some of those moments where the trail was kind of kicking your butt, how did you deal with that? Both the mental, you talked about your mantras, saying these kind of pep talks that you're giving yourself, but how did you deal with it? Kind of the physical exhaustion. I know early on in the trail you had some knee issues pop up where you're having to do some stuff. So talk about how the physical aspects of the trail that you dealt with.
Yeah. Within the first week of trail, oh man, I was kicking myself. I still couldn't put a finger on what happened, but I got a knee injury coming down off of Blood Mountain to my first resupply. And that was really a kick to the confidence because that happened so early. And I had in my head that, I wasn't egotistical about my shape or anything, but I had been backpacking for a week. I knew I could do that, and I wasn't even quite to that point. So it definitely challenged me. I definitely had to have my first hard conversations with myself in that first week. But yeah, that knee injury persisted for probably a month after that. I was dealing with some form of knee pain and doing something to work through it. By the end, all I needed was KT tape, but I had a knee brace and all sorts of stuff to get me through to the point that it wasn't an issue anymore. But as my knee pain went away, and I think it is a direct correlation, as my knee pain went away, the rest of my leg muscles were getting stronger. And I think that that's why my knee came back, because it's called trail legs. It took me about a month and a half to get them fully. And at that point, that's just kind of the level that people talk about where your legs know what's happening. And they get sore each day, but they're pretty well in the shape that you really need them to be to go the remaining distance. And so from that point on, at the point you get your trail legs, in terms of physical challenges, it's mostly just the unforeseen injuries that could pop up that are always a fear factor. And you just, at least for me, I just pretended like it wasn't going to happen. And I didn't think about it too much because it was too scary.
You were not thinking something into not existing. I gotcha.
Yeah, it's like reverse manifestation. If I don't admit that it's a possibility, it's not going to happen.
Gotcha. So when you talk about, like, I'm sure after day after day after day, week after week, you kind of develop a routine that you're doing on a daily basis because your day is filled with lots of walking. What was kind of like your specific daily routine?
Yeah, so mornings were usually pretty quick. We rose with the sun and we went to sleep with the sun. So that changed through the seasons. But mornings were pretty quick. A lot of people were making hot breakfast and coffee in the morning, and I was really jealous of their coffee. But I also don't have much energy in the mornings. So mornings were a pretty well wake up, pack up, go to get the system in motion. And then, man, as I went down the trail from Georgia up to Maine, the number of snacks that happened throughout the day increased dramatically. So that, the snacking would happen by the end. About once an hour, I was having a good snack.
Gotcha.
And then,
So what was your go-to snack as far as on the trail?
Man, I
AKA,
have
what is the
so
snack
many
that you could
favorites.
probably never eat again?
Well, that would be two different questions.
Oh, okay.
I luckily did not get tired of my favorite snacks. Those were peanut M&Ms and peanut butter cream pies, like the oatmeal cream pies from Little Debbie's. They make
Uh-huh.
them with peanut butter in the middle, which I never knew
Oh
about, but it
my.
blew my mind. And both of those have followed me home. But no, as far as a food I could never see again, it's the tuna packets.
Gotcha. So what made you decide to go the route of taking a hammock on the trail versus the traditional tent?
Yeah, so I have hammock camped for a really long time. And I do technically own a tent. It's a 4-person tent from Walmart that I bought like 10 years ago for $50. So not a
Gotcha.
backpacking tent. That's a tent that I take if I'm camping with multiple people and a dog perhaps or something. But aside from that, if I wasn't using it in those cases, I have been using a hammock to camp. And so it was kind of natural. That's what I know. I know I can sleep really well in a hammock. And I knew that of all long trails, the AT is the one. Well, I guess I'm thinking of the Triple Crown specifically, but the Appalachian Trail has no shortage of trees. And of all times, if I have the option to go try a hammock camping setup, I'm going to do it because the availability of trees could be a limiting factor for other trails that I go hike one day. So, yeah, it's just kind of what I knew. It's what I had, and I wanted to try it.
So what was the hammock setup that you eventually deciding to take on trail, and did that hammock setup change any throughout your trail?
Yeah, a couple key pieces changed. So, um, I like to say that I embarked on the AT with a beginner hammock setup, and I think I still kind of finished with one. None of my stuff is too terribly technical, but I have the Jungle Nest hammock, which is the one they have with the bug net, which was a necessity. So I've got the Jungle Nest and the Helios straps, which I still to this day I'm not sure how I got them. They just appeared in my gearbox one day. So
I tell my wife the same thing about so much gear, so I can relate on that gear just randomly showing up.
yeah, yeah, it was a surprise to me. So those were the two
See, I'm
things
not the only one.
exactly. I get it. So yeah, so those are the two products I had. I also started with some snake skins that I can't remember where I got those from. Might have been Hennessy. Maybe. I picked them up from REI at some point, and I started the trail. Seasoned hammock campers are probably going to laugh at me. I started the trail by trying to use that as a simplification system to get my tarp and my hammock in one. And it did fit, but it meant that if anything had any moisture, everything was wet. And so
Gotcha.
the snake skins got ditched less than 2 weeks into my hike, I think. But I did start with them. And the tarp that I started with was just a tarp that my dad had given me for Christmas years ago. It was a Chill Gorilla tarp. I couldn't tell you what kind it was. I just remember the brand name because I thought it was funny. But nothing special, pretty heavy. And as far as upgrading my gear goes, I kept my hammock, I kept the straps, I ditched the snake skins completely, but I upgraded the tarp. That was where I invested my money. And so I actually purchased it my first week on trail. And then it took long enough for it to get sent to me that I didn't get it for like almost 3 weeks later. But I got a hammock gear Dyneema tarp with the doors on the end. Not the Palace. I didn't have quite the big one, just the standard tarp size. And I love that thing. That's probably easily one of my favorite pieces of gear that I got. And then in May, I went to Trail Days, and Dutchware had a tent there along with another hammock company. I can't remember who else was set up. And I got some of the Stingers, to make the actual strapping of the tarp around the trees a faster process. I had a couple frustrating mornings when I first started the trail because my first about 10 days actually didn't get above 40 degrees. And most evenings and nights were well below freezing. My coldest night was 12 degrees. And so there were definitely some frustrating times of trying to untie knots and tie knots in absolute freezing weather. So the stingers really came in handy for that. So yeah, that was the system I ended with.
Awesome. So how did you deal with situations where sleeping in a hammock may not have been in the picture? And like as far as like sitting in shelters and things like that, did you take a pad with you for those situations, or how did you deal with those?
Yes, YouTube had a lot of comments about my sleep system. I had a foam pad. Couldn't tell you where it came from. It was just a pad we had in our basement that I cut to the shape of my sleeping bag. And that was all I used. I didn't have an underquilt or anything. That was what I used in the hammock itself. And I also chose that because knowing the Appalachian Trail has these shelters, which most trails don't have, I wanted to utilize them. And so the foam pad gave me the flexibility to do both hammock or be in a shelter or cowboy camp, which I did a lot of as well. So yeah, I had a foam pad that gave me that flexibility. But pretty much that's one of the biggest questions I get about hammock camping on the Appalachian Trail is if I had trouble finding trees. And no, the answer is no. I a couple times that I could probably count on one hand had an issue with it, but it was not because of my inability to find trees. It was because at that point in time I was hiking with a group. And I made decisions that I knew were a little bit riskier in the sense that I wasn't sure if there were trees on top of this mountain or, it was some sort of a bald that we were headed to. And I wasn't sure how close tree line actually was to it. But I decided to go with the group because I was hiking with people and I wanted to be with them. Had I been solo, I may have made different decisions to make sure that I had trees in that case. But in all those instances, I actually got to share a tent once with one of my family members. And then the other times, the only reason it was risky is because I was just banking on being in a shelter, and whether or not the shelter space can be kind of questionable, but I got lucky all those times. So yeah, really no real problems.
Gotcha. So would you say that looking back, if you were to do the trail again, you would totally go hammock again?
Oh yeah, 100%.
Gotcha. Now, did while you were on the trail, I know hammocks have kind of grown in popularity, especially with the thru-hiker community past couple of years, which makes me really excited to talk to a hammock camper that has done the AT. We were in the Shenandoah National Park early this summer, and we were on trail, kind of one of the connector trails that kind of overlapped the AT just a little bit. And there was a thru-hiker there that was hammock camping, and I wanted so much to just stop and have a conversation with him, but he was less than enthused about having a conversation with me at the time. So I was like, hey, I do this podcast. It would be really, really cool if you could just like lend me your ear for 5. But he was just God. So did you notice a lot of people on trail using hammocks versus the tent?
There's more than I expected because of the lack of online presence, like you're saying. I would say probably 15%. I mean, this is a super rough guesstimate, but maybe like 15% of hikers I came across had a hammock, and it was so exciting. And talking to other thru-hikers and also some ridge runners who have hammock setups, it was always just a moment. I never had anyone who didn't reciprocate my sudden excitement of finding someone else who was in a hammock, because we would always come together and I'd be like, oh my gosh, I see you have a hammock. I have a hammock. What do you have? And we would give like tours of each other's setups and then talk about our experience on the AT so far. So yeah, it was there's not a whole lot of us, but it is a growing community on the AT, and it was really exciting to find people.
Oh man, so it sounds like a hammock hang atmosphere even on the AT. So we just might be a rare breed.
It might be. It is growing in popularity though, so there will be more every year, I think.
Are you telling me you don't see that same excitement shared among tent dwellers?
I mean, you know, I think
Gotcha.
I think I maybe see it when someone has an updated tent version that someone else has. You know, they got the same model or something, but it's a lot less excitement, I guess.
Gotcha. So as I mentioned before our episode, Paul, my co-host, who's not with us this week, is AT thru-hiker of class of 2012. I hope I get that right, Paul. And he had some questions that he specifically wanted to ask you for. Let's talk about your trail name. How did you get the term TC? And how did the meaning change maybe over the course of your trip?
Oh no.
I know this answer, but I figured I would get the reaction to the question, so I'm definitely going to ask.
Oh, good. Okay. Yeah. So, so my trail name is TC, and it is TC because I controlled it because I didn't like what I initially got called. My initial trail name, and I'll tell the story of how that came about in a second. I vetoed. I said no to it like 4 times, but my reputation the first few weeks on trail was so strong that that's how people knew me. So I had to take it. Anyway, so the story in short is that the rain gear that I had is called Frog Togs. And I had the jacket and the pants, and the jacket worked great. It made it kind of just barely, but it made it to the end of the trail with me. And the pants, how do I describe this? They work really well for walking, but as soon as you do lateral movement, say if you're trying to squat down to maybe like tie in a stake or something like that, they have no flexibility. So they ripped immediately on me from seam to seam down the crotch. And
Oh, wow.
I was stubborn, and I was like, you know what? I just started the AT. I'm not getting rid of these. I'm going to make it work. I have duct tape. And so I duct taped the crotch of my rain pants. And that was apparently a really exciting and funny thing for all of my fellow thru-hikers. So they tried to call me tape crotch, and then that stuck, and that is what I said no to 4 times. So I controlled it to TC. And then, yeah, like you said, it morphed as I went down the trail. Thank goodness. That was my hope. It morphed into Tough Cookie at one point because I made it through the Smokies faster than I thought I would. Then it morphed into Trail Conservationist and Trail Cleaner was one that specifically YouTube commenters wanted me to be called because I picked up trash as I went along the trail. And then it ended as, it was originally Thunder Calves because I had the biggest calves apparently of my family. And then it ended as Thunder Cows because according to my family members, my calves had grown up. Yep.
Well, that's a interesting growth pattern from tape crotch to
it's a journey.
Thunder Cows.
Yeah.
Gotcha. So what were some of your favorite places on trail, whether they be towns or kind of locations, maybe like a top 3 or so?
Yeah, great question. Oh gosh, so many. Let's see if I can narrow it down to 3. The Smokies were probably one of the early super high points. I, being generally from the region, had been in the Smokies and had touched or hiked pieces of the AT in the Smokies before. And so it just kind of felt like I had moments of feeling like I was actually turning my dreams into reality, being there as a thru-hiker, because I had always been on the trail and seen other thru-hikers before and talked to them and thought to myself, oh, one day can't wait for this to be me. I hope this is me one day. And then I had multiple moments going through the Smokies of being like, holy crap, I did it. I'm out here. This is me. So that was
I'm a real hiker.
I'm a real hiker. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yes, exactly. So that was, yeah, the Smokies, man. And there, I mean, add on top of that, just gorgeous views, really, really specific ecosystem types. Amazing. Let's see, another one. Kind of polar opposite, but being up in the White Mountains is another one. Everybody gets really excited about Franconia Ridge, and Franconia Ridge is amazing. It's this one ridge section in the White Mountains where you're on the actual ridge of a mountain, so you've got slopes down both sides of you and views almost 360 around you, and it's super beautiful. But if you hike 2 days past that on the AT, there's a section that is much more remote that is the same. And it was in my mind almost more beautiful, kind of because of the lack of people. But it had the same just breathtaking views off both sides. And I was really close also at that point to Mount Washington and Lake of the Clouds hut where I stayed. And that was the one hut in the White Mountains that I actually stayed in. So that day was also extra special because I knew I was staying under a roof, and they don't have flushing toilets, but they have toilets, which is exciting. So that was another
It's
really
the
cool
little
section.
things.
It is. Running water, honestly, I still get excited getting to wash my hands with soap. And let's see, one more. Probably in Virginia, around Roanoke, around McAfee Knob. In that section, there's the Triple Crown of Virginia, which is Dragon's Tooth, McAfee Knob, and wow, I just forgot the name of the other one. There are 3 really iconic views out of Virginia, and they're all within like a day and a half of each other. And that section was just also particularly beautiful.
Gotcha. Okay. So let's flip the script a little bit. What was some of your least favorite sections of the trail?
Pennsylvania.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Not too much thought process there.
No, that one was ready to go. Pennsylvania was not my favorite. The mountains in the Mid-Atlantic die back a lot, and the trail does not get flat by any means, but it definitely was a lot more mild. So there was less, I don't want to call it excitement during my days because there was so much interesting stuff happening on trail around us, but we weren't getting the vistas and views that we had been having before, and that's when the rocks started. The Mid-Atlantic takes a lot of people off trail, I think, because that's when the mental game really starts to kick in, because you're getting a lot less feedback for the work that you're putting in. And it is easy to go home if that would be your choice at that point. The Mid-Atlantic also and through Pennsylvania, you have very easy access to towns. A lot of the hiking through there is around farmland, which is beautiful in its own right. And, private land easements, things like that. But because of that, you also have really close proximity to civilization often. And I actually really didn't like that. The only kind of sketchy incidences I had with people, which was the most dangerous part of the Appalachian Trail, is just other people, were all in Pennsylvania. And I think it's just because we would cross 20 road crossings a day. There was just a lot of interaction with community members. And I also just, some of my least favorite towns were in Pennsylvania, but the rocks also, even being in the forest, we were getting frustrated with the rocks. So yeah, Pennsylvania was rough.
Gotcha. All right. So what was your favorite hostel to stay at?
Oh man, there were so many good ones. Above the Clouds Hostel in Georgia was my first stay. It's where I went to with my knee injury and took my first zero. It will forever have a soft spot in my heart. Lucky, Disco, and Chief treated us really well. Further up in Virginia, You've got some really good ones. Let's see. Let me pull a couple of names out of the hat.
I know Paul speaks very highly of Woods Hole.
Oh, Woods Hole, yes. Oh gosh, and Neville, who owns it. I mean, that's just a whole family legacy. That hostel. That farm has always been a hostel. She has a picture on the wall inside of her. I believe it's her grandfather, or maybe her great grandfather, when he bought the property. And the original house as it was, they've added a little bit onto it since. And it was a hostel from the start. So absolutely incredible. Beautiful farm to table dinner and breakfast. Gosh, I mean, absolutely incredible stay. Beautiful, beautiful land there, and right off of trail, which is very nice. And then up north, the Hostel of Maine. Oh, the Maine Roadhouse. That one was really great. They had onesies for hikers to wear after you got out of the shower as loaner clothes. So we went to town for food, very appropriately dressed is what I'll call it. that was a really good stay and a really beautiful house. The ones that stand out in my mind are the ones that were clean, to be honest. The ones that I walked into and I felt like I could get myself reset and cleaned and have a solid night's sleep. But yeah, there's so many good people, and there are so many new hostels popping up too. With more people finishing the AT, there's more past through hikers who are opening hostels. So there's just so many options now. There was never a time at which we had a shortage of hostel stays.
Gotcha. So you talked about numerous times how some awesome people that were either former through hikers or people on trail or just people in town. So let's talk about trail magic a little bit. What was some of the best trail magic that you had, or maybe a time where the trail magic, a bottle of Coke was like the thing that kept you alive that day?
Yeah, it was a can of Cheerwine.
Yes. In fact, yeah. I could go for a bottle of Cheerwine right now.
And what made the Cheerwine that much more special is that it was in Maine. It was as far as you could have gotten from North Carolina. Oh. And there was a guy who was camping in his car to do trail magic right on trail. And he said that he had 2 cans of Cheerwine. And he said he'd been saving them because he didn't want to give them to someone who wasn't from North Carolina. And both myself and one of my family members, Sparky, is also from North Carolina. And we got the Cheerwine, so we felt very special. But besides that, there was a woman named Queen Diva who followed us up trail with permission. We were letting her know where we were going to be. Because this is what she does every year. She travels up and down the Appalachian Trail, providing trail magic. And she'll kind of hone in on a few groups of hikers, not just to give them trail magic, but to know kind of where people might be. So she's not just posting up at a random road crossing. She knows she'll at least feed some people that day. And so we, lucky enough, were a group that she chose to keep tabs with. And so let's see, where did I meet her? I met her in the Shenandoahs for the first time. She actually even brought me a COVID test when I first met her because I got sick a few times on trail. And the second time I actually worried it was COVID. Thankfully it was not. But she brought me a COVID test without even knowing me. And then she followed us up trail until Massachusetts, I believe it was, or no, Vermont, excuse me. Vermont was the last time we saw her. And she was just absolutely incredible. She made amazing full-blown meals for us right there on the side of the trail. So yeah, absolutely incredible woman. But then just so many others, the ones that are unexpected. The first trail magic that I got in Georgia, this guy came flying up the road in this little Honda on a road that I didn't think his Honda would make it on. And he came flying up the road. He's saying he was going to give someone a ride, someone else on trail. And I was in a line of like 6 hikers at that point. It was early on. There was a lot of people on trail. And he walked right up to me and he goes, "Hey, you want some pie?" And I said, "What?" He said, "Do you want pie?" And out of his like jeans pocket, he pulled one of those little pies that's like wrapped up in a cardboard sleeve. I got a cherry pie on like day 3. So, I mean, it just so many different levels of trail magic. There were people who saw us in restaurants and comped our bill because they knew what we were doing. And we never found out who those people were. It was just, yeah, incognito trail magic. But yeah, so many people.
So, you talked about, people being kind of the scariest thing about the trail, which I can agree with. So, what was your worst time on trail, or maybe maybe the low point, or maybe the scariest time that you were on trail?
My scariest times on trail were not even necessarily that scary. I guess now in retrospect, in the moment, it felt a little bit more so. Nothing ever came to confrontation, but just people in towns who might not have been in the right state of mind, just kind of getting a little bit too much in our grill. That was kind of the scariest that it ever got. And in the time, it felt pretty spooky, and we were pretty ready to run away to the backwoods, which was comforting at that point for us. And that was probably just the scariest, was just people in towns who didn't have all their wits about them necessarily. But in terms of a low point, probably my lowest point on trail was walking out of Hot Springs, North Carolina. That was, so my boyfriend and my mom dropped me off at trail in Georgia. And then the next time I got to see them was in Hot Springs, which was 300 miles later. And everybody talks about how hard it is to say goodbye to your people when you start the trail, but saying goodbye each sequential time after that got exponentially harder. So there were a couple things going on. I had been hiking alone and I hadn't found a group of people yet, and I really wanted to be hiking with people. I wasn't hiking solo kind of out of choice. I was hiking solo because that's what I had ended up doing. And so I was already kind of in a low state, and then I had to say goodbye to my people again. And that was very hard. And also Hot Springs is about an hour from home. And so it was almost too close to be having that moment and to have them there, because I could have just gone home with them, and it would have been over so fast. In a heartbeat. It would have been a fast decision, and I would have been home, showered within an hour and a half. I didn't, but that was incredibly hard to walk away from. And it was raining. It was one of our rainiest days at the beginning. It was one of the rainiest days. And so it was like a perfect storm. I had my first, not last, but my first full mental breakdown on trail, and had a bit of a come to Jesus, and took a step back. And I had walked out of town that day, and I called myself a shuttle and went right back to a hostel and was like, I'm not making this decision now. If this is what I choose to do and to go home, I'll make that later, but I need to be dry and warm and fed before I make that call. So I went back to town. I got dry, warm, and fed, and decided to stay on trail. And got a shuttle right back to where I had gotten off trail and kept going north. But that day hiking out of Hot Springs, for the rest of the trail, was the lowest I was.
Okay. I can definitely imagine having those severe highs and lows throughout the trail. You're in some ways physically deprived, sleep deprived, especially if you've been hiking alone for a while. Now, you did not start the trail hiking alone, correct?
No. I started the trail with a friend of mine, who's still a friend of mine in the Asheville area. We both wanted to do the trail. She was there the day I decided to do it in 2020. And we talked about it. She decided she wanted to as well. She had kind of a similar life path where it had always been a dream. And so we started it together, and less than a week into our hike, we got to a point of needing to separate our hikes. so that we could each have the hike that we needed and wanted to have. And so we did that. So that was part of what added to that kind of surprise at being alone on trail factor, because I had intended to have at least one person the whole time that I could, talk to and say, hey, here's how I'm feeling, and this is what's going on for me today. And I didn't have that. I had a lot of interactions on trail because the AT is very social. There are a lot of people on trail, but there's a point at which the interactions of saying, hi, how are you? What's your name? Where are you from? Why are you hiking the Appalachian Trail? Just that sequence on repeat doesn't really actually do anything for a deep connection. And I got to a point of really lacking that kind of a connection. And I was really needing it. So that was part of what actually added to the shock of the fact that I had been hiking alone at that point for about 2.5 weeks. And I really wanted people around me.
I can definitely see how that would be a driver, especially how you talked about the same conversations over and over and over. It eventually just sounds like you're a tape recorder. Just press this button and the same story will come out over and over and over.
Yeah, it's like icebreakers on repeat.
So, if let's say if I was considering doing the Appalachian Trail in a hammock, what would be some of the tips that you would give me looking to jump on the trail?
Test your stuff and test yourself. So test yourself in the sense of really question why you're hiking the trail, question what your goals are, and also probably write them down. I think a lot of things suggest that, but I would suggest that also, to write down your goals, what you want to get out of the hike, and also maybe a less popular opinion, but I would also suggest writing down what your hard stops are. If you get to a point, for example, where you're not enjoying this one part of the trail, if that's what your goal is, have a hard conversation with yourself. Why are you still out there? If you're having repeated bad interactions with people because you're in a bad mood regularly, have a hard conversation with yourself. I think it's important to have those hard stops, because you can almost get so goal oriented on the AT that you lose sight of the little things and your mental health along the way, and things might start to slip. And so it's important to have those stops for yourself to check in and make sure that you are in a good space and doing what you want to be doing. Because that changes for people out there. And then as far as challenging your stuff or testing your stuff, just use it. And for more than a one night out sort of situation, I would say go for a week somewhere with exactly the gear you think you're going to take to test it. The changes that I made to my gear was all stuff that I didn't have experience with, or I didn't have enough experience with. I had taken out on, I did 2 different shakedown hikes, and they were each one night. And that wasn't enough to really actually test, like the snakeskins, for example, to see what that was going to be like if they got wet. I just didn't have the time under my belt to have seen that. And also, along with that, if you're planning to go out and backpack for a week to test all your things, if the weather is going to be crap, do it anyway, because you're going to have to be out on the AT if the weather is crap. And it's better to be shocked and figure out what it feels like to hike in wet shoes and socks for 3 days before you hit the trail, as opposed to during it and then find out that's a deal breaker. So
yeah, I hear
just
it rains
test
on
yourself.
the AT occasionally.
Oh, yeah. It's something like a third of the time on trail it's raining. We actually got very lucky in the South and Mid-Atlantic. Almost all of our rain hit us in New England. They had a wild weather year. Maine had record-breaking rain. We were in Vermont for a state of emergency because of all the rain they were getting. All of ours hit at once. So the last probably month and a half of our trail, we had wet feet.
Gotcha. So what can your YouTube viewers and listeners of the podcast? So what's next for Appalachian Adventurista. And would you ever consider another long through hike, either of the AT again or some of the other major trails?
Yeah, the YouTube channel itself will continue. I took a little bit of a hiatus from it so that I could recover from trail and um, kind of get my life in order at home and figure out what the next steps are and what my next phases of life are going to be, which is a really fun process. And but the channel will continue. I have a post trail series that I am getting ready to embark on, including, it kind of kicked off this last week. I had a live Q&A, post trail Q&A that I did, and I have a handful of other videos that I will be coming out with, giving feedback on gear items, how certain things went with the AT and things like that. And then I have a lot of ideas, because as I found out through this process, I enjoy the process of making videos and preserving my memories like that and sharing information, because like I said, this is totally my passion. I could talk about this forever. So it makes the process of making YouTube videos about the stuff that I love really fun for me. So I will be continuing post trail stuff with I have ideas for a Western North Carolina series and some other stuff that I'm going to keep in my back pocket. But yeah, the channel will definitely be continuing. I'll be posting things on my YouTube and my Instagram account. And as far as long trails go, I mean, as early as the first week on trail of the AT, people were asking people if they were going to be triple crowning, which is to do the Appalachian Trail, the Pacific Crest Trail, and the Continental Divide Trail. And I just don't know. There's no way to answer that. I could see myself doing the AT again one time. I could see myself going west and potentially doing one of those trails one day. I will say I have trails on my trail bucket list that will be happening first. So it's not to write that stuff out of the question, but those aren't the trails I'm going to be jumping to immediately. But definitely some other through hikes in my future of some sort.
Okay, awesome. So for those that want to get to know your channel a little bit more, you can find her at Appalachian Adventurista. You also have an Instagram as well?
Yes. Yeah, it's under the same name.
Okay, awesome. So make sure you go and check Aly's YouTube series out. It's really good. And I was talking to her before we hopped on. She's got some really great music for some local musicians as well, which it was a very music to my heart. And you throw a lot of like really random cool little facts about the areas that you're in. Like an area that you were in, I want to say maybe in Georgia or North Carolina, how that particular area was not under the glacier ice, so the entire ecosystem in that little area is completely different.
Yeah, Smokies.
Yeah, it was really, really cool. One thing, so I'm in the middle of rewatching your series again, and so one of the last videos that I was watching, you were in Irwin, Tennessee. Do you know the reason that Irwin is that their claim to fame?
No, do tell.
Okay, so I in college I worked at a camp in around Johnson City, Tennessee, and a friend of mine who actually lives in Irwin. It is a small little podunk town in the middle of nowhere, but their claim to fame is, and this is slightly morbid, but we're going to run with it. In the early part of the 1900s, there was a circus that came to town, and there was an elephant there that got out of control and ended up killing either one or a couple of people in the town. The town put the elephant on trial, convicted him, and ended up hanging the elephant off of a bridge in Irwin. So that is Irwin's claim to fame.
I wonder if that's the bridge we walked over.
That could be very, very like if you Google search it, I'm sure you can find pictures. If that's kind of your thing, but yeah.
Yeah, wow, what a claim to fame.
But like I said, I have thoroughly enjoyed talking with you tonight. We should definitely catch up with you again explore more of your bucket list adventures. I'm really looking forward to hearing about those and seeing the trail may take you.
Thank you so much. This has been so much fun. I could talk about this for like 4 more hours. So anytime.
Good deal. Good deal. All right. So that wraps up this week's episode of the Hammock Hangers podcast. We really hope you've enjoyed hanging out with us. And Aly, thanks again for coming on and sharing us about your adventure on the AT. And hopefully we can do it again soon. Before we go, don't forget to hit that like button if you enjoyed our episode today. And subscribe to our podcast for more episodes that will keep you hanging on the edge of your seat. Stay connected with us on social media to keep the hammock conversations going, share your own hammock adventures, and stay updated on all things hammock related. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. Just search for the Hammock Hangers Podcast. Thanks again for tuning in, hangers. Until next time, may your hammocks be cozy, your views breathtaking, and your relaxation uninterrupted. Happy hanging, everybody.